Hey crocheters, welcome back to my crochet channel. If you've been following my blog or my channel, you may have already noticed that I get inspired by animated series, cartoons, books, and video games. And this crochet bookmark is no exception. By the way, can you guess which anime series was the inspiration for this crochet bookmark? Leave your guess in the comments before the video ends and let me know what you think. So I'm going to take you through the steps to crochet this mushroom bookmark. I would consider this to be an intermediate crochet pattern, so you should be familiar with crochet techniques like working in the round and basic stitches, but if you need a tip or a refresher, I do have some tutorials on crochet basics and how to make a magic ring. I'll leave a link to those so you can check them out. This mushroom is worked in continuous rounds, so there is no joining at the end of the round or making any slip stitches or turning. It's all just done in continuous rounds. There is a portion that is done in the back loop only, just to create this edging along the mushroom cap and the base of the stem. And this thin strap is made up of chains worked directly from the center of the mushroom stem. I really wanted this pattern to be no sew, so that's as little sewing as possible. So the chain goes straight from the stem and then the bulb is directly worked from the chain. But don't worry, I will show you how to do that. And lastly, there is a little bit of cross stitching involved just to add the classic white spots on a red mushroom cap look. Overall, it's a pretty straightforward pattern, and I'm excited to share it with you. So let's get started. So for this bookmark, I will be using some Friends Cotton 8/4. This is the hobby cotton, and I'm going to be using the red for the mushroom cap, this tan color for the stem, and the white to add the cross stitch spots on the mushroom cap. And I'm using a 3mm crochet hook. I'll be using an embroidery needle for the cross stitching on the mushroom cap. Also recommend having a stitch marker handy so that you can keep track of your rounds, because this pattern is worked in continuous rounds, so there is no turning at the end of the round or joining with a slip stitch. It's just continuing on to the next round. And lastly, I have a small amount of stuffing to add to the mushroom cap, which I don't know if I'll use all of this, but it all depends on how firm you want your mushroom to be stuffed. So now I'm going to get started, and we'll start with the mushroom cap. So I'm going to start with the red. So starting with round 1, I'm going to work 6 single crochet into a magic ring. And for this particular pattern, I'll be working yarn under as opposed to yarn over. That will give the pattern or the fabric a bit more of a cross stitch appearance, and it'll just be a little bit more intuitive when I get to the cross stitching part. I will also be keeping my tension tight, but not so tight that it hurts my wrist. I do want to be mindful of that. So working 6 single crochet into a magic ring. And then pull the yarn tail to close the ring. And then I can start on round 2, which is to make 2 single crochets into each stitch around to increase. And at the end, I'll have 12 stitches. The one tricky or challenging aspect of this crochet mushroom is the size. I tend to struggle a little with small projects, but I make them anyway because they're super cute. In the case of this mushroom bookmark, the size of the hook and the weight of the yarn can pose some challenges, so remember to take your time and be mindful of your tension. If you're finding that the stitches are too tight and you can't insert the hook into your stitches, then you might need to switch to a smaller hook or adjust your tension. And if that doesn't help, you can also make this with a heavier weight of yarn and a larger hook, like a worsted weight yarn, and maybe like a 3.75 or 4mm crochet hook. Of course, your bookmark will be a little bit bigger, so just something to keep in mind. Onto round 3, I'm going to increase into the next stitch and then single crochet into the next stitch. And I'm going to repeat that around 6 times. And at the end of the round, I will have 18 stitches. I'm using the yarn under technique when working my single crochet stitches, and as you can see, it's a bit of a challenge for me. Or maybe it's my hook, because I swear it naturally wants to yarn over. So if you're like me and you absolutely cannot do yarn under, you can most definitely yarn over. You'll still be able to cross stitch the mushroom cap. It'll just be V shapes instead of X's, and that works fine too. Okay, on to round 4. I'm going to increase into the next stitch, then single crochet in the next 2 stitches, and I'll repeat that 6 times, and I'll have 24 stitches at the end of the round. I want crochet projects to be fun and relaxing to do. And don't get me wrong, this bookmark is fun. I mean, there's a reason I'm making it again and showing you how to make it. But I'm not gonna lie, this one is a little fussy and finicky. And that might be because I don't usually crochet small projects. Much respect to anyone who does micro crochet, by the way. That is some serious skill. I think I might try this again, but next time I'm going to try with a larger hook and worsted weight yarn to help ease up on the tension. And I mentioned tension before, and it's not only about having neat and even stitches. Tension also either adds or takes away from the fun and the relaxation. It's called tension. Just saying the word makes me tense. Anyway, I certainly don't want you to get stressed out and frustrated trying to crochet, and I especially don't want you getting wrist or hand cramps. You hear this all the time in fitness advice, and that is to always listen to your body. So I'm going to say the same here. Always listen to your body. There have been so many times I've forced my hands and wrists into working in super tight stitches, and my body and mind suffered for it. So make sure you stretch your hands and wrists, and if it hurts in any way, just stop. Try a different hook or yarn weight, take a break, check your posture, and check your tension. Okay, now for rounds 5 to 7, I'm just going to single crochet around without increasing. I have finished working rounds 5 to 7. I'm going to use the white yarn to cross stitch some spots onto the mushroom cap. So I'm just using a sort of blunt embroidery needle, and while I'm stitching and working into the mushroom cap, I'm going to actually put the stitch marker into the working loop. That way I know it's not gonna unravel on its own. So as you can see, each of the stitches has formed like a little X. And so that's what I'm going to use as a guide for adding my spots. I'm just going to insert the white thread, and I'm gonna leave a little tail so that I can tie a knot later on. And then just use these little X's as a guide. And the spots, they don't need to actually look round or like spots. I mean, I'm just cross-stitching X's into the stitches themselves. So you can see when you work yarn under, the fabric turns out having nice little X's on it, and that's what I'm using as a guide, as a reference to insert the needle into the stitches and create little X's just randomly. There's no specific order, and there aren't a specific number of spots to stitch onto the mushroom cap. It's just however many you want, or none at all if you prefer. So I'm going to use this yarn tail to tie a knot and make sure that my stitches don't come loose. And then I can move on to round 8 of the pattern. Okay, continuing on to round 8, I'm going to be working into the back loop only of each stitch, and I'm going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches and then decrease, and I'll repeat that 6 times around for a total of 18 stitches at the end of the round. And working into the back loops only is going to give the mushroom cap a bit of a definition on the edge before I continue to decrease and then switch to the sort of tan color. So working in the back loop only adds texture and dimension to all kinds of crochet projects. And I'm a big fan of how it looks. But real talk, I'm not a fan of back loop only in amigurumi. It's another clunky, finicky, fussy crochet technique that I would rather not do. Except, as I mentioned, I love how it looks and that it's going to give this mushroom cap some definition. Whenever I find myself struggling or getting bored or annoyed with a project, I have to remind myself why I'm doing it. Am I rushing through to finish the project as quickly as I can? So is it about a race or a competition against myself? Am I crocheting for the love of making something with my hands? Or is it the finished product that I care about the most? In this case, it's to make something that will make me smile whenever I look at it or use it. Knowing that a little mushroom is going to poke out from the top of a book just makes me so delighted. And that is why, even if it's finicky and frustrating, I do it anyway. I mean, look how cute this looks already. And here's a hint to help you guess which animated series inspired this bookmark. The series has cooking in it. I know, so vague. Okay, the next round, round 9, I'm going to work in both loops again, and I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch, then decrease, and I'll repeat that 6 times, and I'll have a total of 12 stitches. And at the end of this round, I'm going to switch to the tan color to work on the stem. And now in my last decrease, before I complete the decrease, I'm going to join the tan yarn to the last stitch. And since I won't be using the red yarn anymore, I'm just going to cut it and tie a knot with the joined tan yarn and secure it. Then for rounds 10 to 12, I'm just going to single crochet into each stitch around without any decreases. And at this point, you can start to add stuffing to the mushroom cap, or you can do this at the end of round 12. So here's what our mushroom cap looks like at the end of round 10, and I'm actually going to start adding stuffing, just because I can already tell it's going to be a little tricky to add the stuffing later on. It can still be done, it'll just be a little cumbersome. And like I said in the beginning of this video, I don't think I'll be using all of this stuffing. It is such a small little mushroom cap. I will be adding some to the stem as well, but it doesn't need to be overly stuffed. Just enough so that the mushroom will keep its shape. So this might be a bit too much stuffing because, as you can see, it's more of a ball shape, and I do want this to stay a little bit flat. So I'm gonna remove some. In this kind of project, sometimes it's just better to have less stuffing than you would necessarily use for other projects like other amigurumi, where you want there to be enough stuffing that it's a little bit firm. But in this case, because I do want the mushroom cap to have this sort of flat bottom part, I do want there to be less stuffing. Now moving on, I'll continue to work my rounds. I have rounds 11 and 12 to do, and I will probably add a little bit more stuffing as I go. I have finished round 12, and I added a little bit more stuffing to the stem, and now I'm going to start decreasing to close the stem. So in round 13, I'm going to work in the back loop only again to create that definition on the base of the stem, and I'm going to decrease 6 times, leaving me with 6 stitches at the end of the round. For this step, you can see I'm slowing down quite a bit. Within the context of crochet, this is where patience and character building come into play. Take your time with this round so that your tension and your stitches stay even. Oh yeah, and I am now using the yarn over technique because, did I mention I like when crochet is fun? If you need to adjust how you crochet something because it will make it more enjoyable for you, absolutely do it. Sometimes, even when I'm following another designer's pattern, I make adjustments if I don't like how a particular step is done. Make it work for you. All right, I'm done crocheting the stem, and I'm going to try and shape the mushroom a little bit. I'm using my scissors to help me out in moving the stuffing around. Oh, and don't worry too much about the stem looking a little pointy at the base. When I'm done with the stem, I'm going to sew some stitches to make it flat. But for now, I'm going to work on the long chain that will be the actual bookmark. Since there is still a gap in the stem base, I'm going to insert the hook into the second and a 5th stitch, and I'm going to pull up a loop and make a slip stitch to close everything up. That way the hook and the yarn are now centered, and I'm ready to make the chains. So this bookmark is going to be for one of my journals, and the book spine is about 8 inches or so in length, so I'm going to chain until I have that length. Time to bring out my ruler, and I have roughly 8 inches, so now I'm going to start on the bulb at the end of the chain. I don't even know if this is called a bulb or not, but that's what I'm calling it here. To make the bulb, without cutting the yarn, I'm going to work 6 single crochet stitches into the 2nd chain from the hook. On the 3rd stitch, I'm just going to let the chain sort of shift to the side, and I'll continue making the remaining stitches. In the next round, I'm going to increase in each stitch around, so I will have 12 stitches at the end of the round. And the long chain is just hanging out in the center as I work. Next, in rounds 3 and 4, I'm going to single crochet around without increasing or decreasing. Okay, I have one more hint for you. If I really wanted to recreate the inspiration for this bookmark, this mushroom should have had 2 legs. But A, I didn't want to get flagged for copyright infringement, and B, I really didn't want to figure out how to add 2 legs without cutting the yarn and joining and sewing and all those extra steps. So it has 1 leg. Okay, I've finished rounds 3 and 4, and to close off this bulb, I'm going to decrease 6 times around. I'm going to cut the yarn and leave a long tail so I can add those stitches I mentioned earlier. But first I need to finish closing up the bulb. As I'm sewing, I'm also stitching into the chain in the middle. And this is because if I were to leave it and I pull on either end of this bookmark, then that bulb is going to get pulled from the bottom where the chain starts, and it will snag and look weird. So this just makes sure that the chain stays in place where it is. Alright, now with the rest of the yarn, I'm going to give the mushroom stem some shaping because I want the stem base to be a little flatter than it is right now. I'm going to insert the needle in the last round of the base and bring it through toward the top of the mushroom cap. And I'm leaving a short tail so that I can tie a knot later on. I'm also going to use the stuffing inside the mushroom cap to hold the yarn in place at first, and then I'm going to bring the yarn through the top and near one of the white spots so I can try to hide the stitches a bit. I'm giving the yarn a gentle tug so that the base caves in and gets flatter, and then I'm happy with how it looks here, so I'm just going to add a few more stitches to make sure the shaping stays in place. Then I'm just going to weave in all the ends, and this crochet mushroom bookmark is done. It's super cute, very nerdy, and extremely functional. Alright, if you made it this far, you probably want to know the series that inspired this project, and that is Delicious Intention. Specifically, the walking mushroom from the opening credits. I would have wanted to give it 2 legs, but maybe that's another project idea for another time. I hope you have enjoyed this crochet pattern and have found some inspiration to make yourself a cute and practical bookmark. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you in the next video.